still one more person, but we'll go ahead and have you guys have our panel introduce yourselves, and before we get into the questions, and then we'll dive into the questions. So I'm not sure how you guys want to divvy up who goes first. Start with, how about Eric?
Sure. My name is Eric Devolt. I'm going into my 25th year of teaching. I teach high school physical education, and I took on health this last year as well. Just honored to be here, and can't wait to see how this conversation goes.
Great. Let's go down to Erika.
Hello, I am Erika Munt. I am teaching high school. Mostly I teach in a weight room and do a lot of strength training, but I also do some other stuff. I'm going into my 11th year of teaching at the school I'm currently at, and yeah, it's excited to be here.
Awesome. How about Joe?
Hi, I'm Joe Bailey. I teach in Wausau, Wisconsin at DCFS Senior High School. I've been there for, I guess, going to my 18th year there. I can't remember, it's 24, 25 overall, kind of lose track. But yeah, that's where I'm at.
And Kaylee.
Hi, I'm Kaylee. I'm from Jeffersonville, Indiana, and I teach in downtown Louisville, Kentucky at an all-girls Catholic school. This is my 11th year of teaching, and I think I found my true paradise there. This will be my 2nd year at the school.
Awesome. And am I missing anyone? Other panel members?
Courtney.
Oh, Courtney.
Hi, I'm Courtney. Going into my 16th year teaching out here in California, Northern California. High school, actually, just started high school this past pandemic year. Was middle school for 13 years. And then I was a teacher on special assignment supporting health and PE K-12 across our district, and then shifted over to high school. So I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. All right. Matt had sent out some questions, and so if we want to just do the round table around the questions, if you want to start at the top and then work our way down. Let's take a couple minutes each. I have to pull up my questions, so I don't have them ready. Sorry.
Scott, I've got them if you want me to read. You want me to just read the first one?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so the first question is, what are some takeaways that you experienced during distance learning that you will implement in person or hybrid next school year? What are some takeaways that you experienced during distance learning that you will implement in person hybrid next school year?
So we were distance learning for March through the end of the school year, and then we went into a hybrid system. But one of the things we did while we were fully distance was, making resources, videos, content for students to be able to access. We were asynchronous, so they could do it at any time. One of the nice things about that has been that when we have been in person, if students have been missing, you've got it there for them to go back to and review and so on. So I think that is something that's going to stay with us. We know we're going to have students coming in and out on quarantines here and there. They may be dipping in and out. So I think that's one positive, that, and particularly with students who, they need to see things or hear things 2 or 3 times, having that resource available for them. And now that we've kind of done it once, and about you, but a lot of us were kind of making videos all day long, trying to get stuff ready for students. Now we've got a bank. Hopefully that development will be a little bit easier as well as moving forward.
I would piggyback on that as well. And I was thinking my slide decks, right, that I used, ours was synchronous for the most part, but that was huge that I am going to continue to use as resources for our students, as well as Padlet. Not sure if any of you have used Padlet, but an amazing basically virtual portfolio. But I feel like now being able to use it with like, okay, you can take your video and look at examples of what, this standard is supposed to be, as well as Pear Deck. Those were amazing resources that I do think I'm going to weave into my teaching this coming year.
To go on with both of you, I love that. We use Microsoft Teams, and I thought that was amazing. But what I'm going to carry over next year is just planning those 2 lessons, like for the kids in class, and then for those kids who do have to go into quarantine again, letting them know ahead of time, like, this is kind of equipment I want you to try to gather of your house, and how we can try to simulate and do the exact same thing. Because I would have some of my students, because I couldn't send home kayaks and stand up paddle boards to their houses and deliver them. So sometimes I would tell the kids to take their tablets with them and like follow along with what they're doing. So they're kind of carrying that person with them, so they didn't feel like they were missing out on the social aspects and the bonding that we did within our classes.
It was a kind of a different experience for me. Most of my teaching this year was in person, but I did, in my health classes, I did have a student or 2 who elected to stay at home to do their education. So I want to continue on with making those resources available for those kids who decide to stay at home again, if that's an option. The school district hasn't made a for sure decision on that yet. But as far as physical education goes, we were not really restricted at all. It was pretty much a regular year. And so just continuing on with good teaching practices is what I'm going to continue to do. But what I did learn, because we did have to go virtual for 2 weeks, which just isn't very long compared to most of you, I guess. But what I did learn is, like, the students are really good about doing the online work for me when we were online. Now trying to motivate them how to continue doing that work when we're back in person, going back to that computer to complete the assignments.
Yeah, I just went like paperless, which has always kind of been a goal. So we learned how to do a lot more stuff through the Google world and things like that. And I don't think that will ever go away. But then the makeup work access will definitely be, we've got all these videos and stuff from last year of our instruction that we'll be able to give kids, when they can't go to school, stuff like that. So even just like a normal absence, I think will be easier to make up in the future. Where before it was like, oh, you weren't here, you can't do it. Well, now we've come up with all these ways to kind of modify our instruction. So.
All right. Anything else to add to that question? All right, the next question was, do you have any physically distanced management strategies for next school year? Do you have any physically distanced management strategies for next school year?
In my classroom, I teach high school, obviously. I think I forgot to say that. Using yoga mats, like giving kids this space that they're staying on really helped, because as soon as you tell them, oh, 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart, somehow I teach all girls, they always bonded up and got close to each other. So really using visual space markers kept them distance and telling them they had to stay on the mat. Or if we had school functions, like we tried to do some of our fundraisers, we used hula hoops. And during like one fundraiser dance-a-thon, everyone had to stay inside their hula hoop so they wouldn't touch anyone else, because girls, they like to group together and get close. So that using the spatial mapping really helped out, and I'll use that again this year.
Yeah, I hope we don't have to do it again, but we did do it for a while because we weren't allowed to share equipment or anything like that. So we just had, like we said, cones set up, and kids had assigned seats or a number that they would have to go into and directly go to their spot. And we were lucky enough, we have a big gym space, or in the weight room, the racks kind of naturally did it. But yeah, I hope I don't have to use some of those things again this year. Our numbers are pretty low right now, so I'm fingers crossed.
Yeah, I'm the same. I live in a small town, about 11,000 people, and our numbers were really low, but we still tried our best to keep the kids physically distanced. And one thing that I liked to do was try to put them in cohorts, and they would be in a cohort for a certain amount of time. So those students would do activities together in their small groups away from the other groups. And that seemed to help quite a bit.
I guess we had a kind of a gradual release of the process. You know, when we started off, like I think a lot of people, we were no equipment, everything got sanitized to death. And then as more and more research came out saying, right, surfaces and equipment less likely and so on, we were still cleaning, but maybe not spraying spick and span madly at everything that existed. So I think what we did notice, and you may have all been the same, is that the number of people getting sick from just the usual common cold was almost zero. So I think a lot of what we're doing with the combination of masks and that definitely helped. So we'll continue, but not as crazy as we were.
We never went back to in-person PE world. So I like your yoga mat and hula hoop ideas in small groups. But yeah, no, I was virtual the entire year. So.
Courtney, do you know yet if you will be back in person in September?
Yes, we will be. Everybody. So we're going, I mean, we did have modified, but all instruction happened in person, or I'm sorry, virtually. And then they went for support for 2 hours, students that opted to, and then there were 2 hours online support. And I was the online person for everything. So yeah.
All right, found my questions now, so I can get back in the mix. If we cannot share equipment between cohorts, how can we incorporate SEL and or class team building?
So we did some of this year because we did heart rate monitors, and so we were able still to kind of do that, but we would have like group competitions, and they'd have to try to get either a total number of minutes as a class or as a small group, or try to all get into that certain zone. So that was one way that we were able to still bring in some of that cooperative learning, even though we were doing the small group stuff. And then we did a lot of the open resources. They had a lot of SEL, but that Tai Chi unit that they had, we used that. It was awesome. Actually, a lot of kids, most kids really enjoyed that, learning that little kind of Tai Chi movement and minute activity. And so that was one thing that we incorporated quite a bit.
Yeah, I agree with anything cooperative learning. You don't necessarily need to have equipment. I mean, like the basic jigsaw structure where, let's say you mentioned Tai Chi, but you could be strength training, you could do dance, you could do, I think what else that would be more distanced. But let's say dance, you take 4 people in a group, each person in the group is responsible for learning a small piece of a dance. They come back together, they put it together. I think more than anything, while yes, we're used to equipment and so on, it's about the social interaction, the individual accountability, that, you know, the group processing, the face-to-face interaction with people. And also what you said, Erika, about having a group goal. So my goal might be to get 10 minutes, but someone else might choose 20 minutes and someone else chooses whatever it is. So at least you're allowing that individual choice for the student while still having them cooperate and try and achieve a common goal. I was thinking, let's say if you had individual equipment, you could also say, right, maybe I choose to work on this particular skill and I am with a peer who is seeing how I'm doing, giving me feedback, and I'm doing the same for that individual. So again, we could both be using a soccer ball, but I might have chosen one skill aspect to work at, and that my partner may have chosen a different skill aspect, but we can still support each other.
I also think with all of those ideas that, you can always have the kids sit down the last few minutes, of course, spread out and reflect as a class. And that way everybody's all on the same page. They can, because each group is going to have different experiences, even if it's the same activity. And that reflection can kind of tie everybody together.
I also feel like scavenger hunt or like escape room type things in smaller groups, right? Where they're solving a puzzle more than like touching all these different things is also useful.
My favorite one that we did this year, I teach a unit of backpacking, and I teach kids survival wilderness, and I bought a bunch of pool noodles to show them, and like pipe cleaners and fuzz balls, how to teach how to build a fire. So they would have to do fitness activities. Everybody would have their own because I could find enough cheap equipment to make that. And I even let the kids add on to it, where we had a campfire after they built it. It was like our cool down aspect. And they told camp stories, like ghost stories with it. It was hilarious. And we even brought out like the YouTube channel of a person that tells professional like ghost stories after you're done backpacking. And I set up this whole obstacle course inside the gym. When they had their backpacks, their little lights, we shut off the lights, they had to use the headlamps. And each station, like each trail part that they hit, they had a question they had to answer there. And I wish I could remember the name of the card. I saw it on Facebook, but it has all these random questions to ask. And it really brought the kids together of talking. We'd be in small groups all spread out. And there was enough cards where I didn't have to sanitize them after every single person touched it, which was nice because the cleaning aspect was really intense, which I kind of like because it taught kids how to clean up after themselves. I was really appreciative of that. But that was a great way that we brought our classes together. But granted, I only had at the most, I think, 16 kids in a class. So that was a huge difference, but it brought us together, and it was hilarious, these camp stories.
And for everybody that might be watching later as well, Mark Friedrich had a great session today called No Touch Team Building Activities, which he had all kinds of things. And he talked about We Connect cards. I don't know if those are the cards you're talking about, but it's a great sounding resource as well. All right, for the next question, how will we build repertoire or connections, I guess, with our students after a year and a half of distance learning?
I know Joe spoke about this, but we pretty much transitioned back to from totally online to hybrid, and then fully in person for most of our classes by May. And I think at first we were really nervous about the size of our classes and how it was going to go, but it was quick. Like the kids were very quickly back in their zone, very quickly back into the normal feel of school, and especially at first they were eager to have those conversations and those relationships. I mean, I think the new wore off pretty quick, but I know as a teacher that's something that you're really worried about. But when we went through it, it was kind of amazing how fast the connections just were like normal, like that far as that conversation and all of that with students. At least that was my experience.
Yeah, you know how often students, particularly at high school level, they're, oh, I don't want to go to school. They were like, yay, we get to go to school. Which, yeah, so I guess I would treat it, and just like you would any new class or any new group coming in, you always got the incoming freshmen or sophomores. We're a 10-12 school, so we're sophomores are our first one. Exactly what you would normally do. Give them opportunity to have their voice heard, their concerns addressed, particularly students who may be pretty concerned about, spacing and sharing and cleaning and so on. Like, give them the opportunity to speak, and then, and then go from there. It's, I think, same as you always would, with a bit extra with the pandemic side to it.
I totally agree. And I just feel like the initial maybe smaller groups, right? Like a little bit smaller to help them just get their voice back and like, oh, I'm seeing somebody in person type thing, and not a black screen. In our world, it's been a lot of black screens. So I do think that smaller group conversation, but exactly like what we do whenever you get a new group of students, is like, who are you? I want to know who you are, and I want you to know who these other people are. But I think just really being mindful of concerns that they may have, things that they may have experienced too, that we sometimes might not focus on in other years, but like, what happened for you during this year? Did you have to go to work and help your family? Did you, some of those experiences that they may have had, give them that space to share it, so then we can come together more as a family. I think will be critical.
That's really what happened to me at the beginning of this last school year, because we were in person right away, and the kids were good about staying in their small groups, but the more they got used to being around each other, it was almost like we went back to normal pretty quick. It was easy for them to adjust back to the normal routine.
And I think when the kids come in and students just celebrate how lucky we are to be together again, I think that's going to be the best part. And just kind of, I don't want to say over exaggerated, but they're probably going to see my initial reaction of being so excited that we're all back together. I know my school is not going to let children choose to be offline or online. Some kids took advantage of that. Even though we were in person all last year, if a family didn't feel safe coming into school, they could choose to do that, and we had to use Teams. But just really celebrate that we get to be together and we get to do really cool cooperative activities again that are close. I am just so excited for that part. And I think if you're excited as a teacher and you let them know it and let them think about how lucky it is, I know they're going to show their gratitude of being able to talk to each other and interact and do fun things instead of being alone from everyone else.
All right. How do you plan to be inclusive with everybody in your class in recent light of social politics that are happening?
I think it's going to be a continual ongoing. I think first of all, you've got to be aware of yourself and any biases that, well, we all have biases. Let's start there. Sometimes we recognize them, sometimes we don't, but being willing to look at yourself first and be like, am I coming at, think about what we teach. We all have our things that we love to teach, and that might come from past experience. It might come from this, but then we have to look at the other side and be like, okay, am I doing the right thing for my students and their needs and their program? And that should be a continual ongoing process. And then again, just like we talked about with students and their experiences during the pandemic, what are our students' experiences, the demographics, how are they made up, and what are they bringing to class that we need to make sure that we are addressing? And if we make mistakes, which we are inevitably going to, then be willing to have conversations and think about, right, what do I need to do to learn more, to be better, to be more inclusive? I think if we go in with that intention, what we're trying to include everybody, and we're consistently reflective, we're going to be going a long way towards that. But ask for help where you need it too.
So I'm pretty lucky. I get to teach in a college town. So we have a pretty vast group of students from all over the world. And one thing that we really try to do is make sure that when they, so I have a weight room, but when they walk into the weight room, we're trying to have pictures of an eclectic group. And we want to make sure that, whoever walks in is going to hopefully be able to see themselves somewhere in that room, even if it's on a photo, so that they know that, we see them. We've also, when I create GIFs, things like that, I try to make sure that I am including, a large group of students, so that, again, when they see it, they see someone like them, not just races, but body sizes as well, and ability levels. I have a couple of kids who are also in wheelchairs, so we try to make sure we have them in a few things too, just so that, like I said, everyone, we want to feel included. The other thing was when we were in our hybrid and we had really small classes, it was really easy and really cool to get to talk to pretty much every student, because basically our class sizes were cut into a fourth, because we were hybrids, we were alternating days. So that was really something kind of eye-opening, but to be able to speak to every student every day was something that I haven't been able to do with some of the class sizes that I've had. So even when we went back into our bigger classes, the conversations may have gotten a little shorter, but I still tried to make sure that I addressed or spoke to every kid every day. And sometimes I did and sometimes I didn't, but that is definitely my goal walking into every class every day.
I think the other main thing, sorry, Kelly, is connecting with other teachers, basically because of what you just said, Erika. It's hard with larger numbers, right, to really know everything we need to know about all of our students. So that is my goal, but also relying on the other team, right, our other teachers that have them in different settings and in smaller classes, and maybe they're writing something that that is, you know, is sharing some experiences that would be helpful for all of us to know, and just really trying to have it be they're all our students, right? Let's try to connect, because it's, you know, if you have as many of us do in a class, for me, it's 45 students in 45 minutes. That gives a minute per student, and then they're stressed, you know, it's just really challenging. But using those resources. Another is, well, you talked about representation. I think that's huge. And not just having open conversations, right? Like, you know, for instance, I just did a session, but on supporting our transgender and non-binary students, right? Like simply just doing my introduction and giving my pronouns. It could be that small and yet huge for some students in our class to be like, oh, she cares what pronouns I use. Okay, I can relax. I can put down at least one part of my guard here, right? Like, I think that's super important. And then also just individualizing. So having their goals, like we have our standards, right? But how are you going to show me in a way that is of interest to you that you can meet this standard? That's always my goal. It becomes really challenging, and then I get overwhelmed. But it is my goal again this year to focus on like, okay, this is the standard. Here are other ideas. What ideas do you have on how you can demonstrate that you have mastery of this without me being like, well, you have to do this, dribble it, you know what I mean? Making it something that they connect with, I think is huge.
I really like that, Courtney, and I try to use that in my classes as well. If I have an assessment of some sort, a lot of times I won't say you have to do this. I'll say you turn in whatever you want to turn in, as long as it meets the needs of the rubric, and you're good to go. And that's a great way to have them give their voice, show their voice, and really who they are. I like that.
All right. The next question, any advice for a former elementary, I guess could be middle school as well, phys ed teacher who got reassigned to a different level or subject?
Hey, I'll jump in on this one. I kind of think what makes you so special as a PE teacher, kind of take that into your new subject that you're teaching. Because this year was my first year I had to teach anatomy and physiology with a cadaver lab next to the university, right next to us. We had access to their cadaver lab. So I kind of went in with, hey guys, you know, I'm a hands-on learner. I love teaching hands-on activities, and I'm a crafter. So we are going to make tons of crafts. We're going to bake, we're going to label. And I think what makes you special as a PE teacher, just let that shine, add that movement into that classroom, add the hands-on learning, and then show that empathy that you have of learning a subject for the first time. Because I know about muscles and the hearts and the bones, but then we get into the immune system, how that functions. I was learning for the first time, and I told them up front, hey, this is the first time I'm teaching this stuff. You know, they offer me a job and I say, yes, I will do it. Just take that excitement and say, hey, we're learning together. Let me know how you guys learn best, and just show what makes you special, what subject that you are passionate and in love with. Has really helped.
I mean, quick and simple would just be, you know, the relationships are key, right? So relationships are key at younger levels, and they are key, and maybe even more so in middle and high school, where if you aren't connected, then our students are not going to, you know, be as engaged. So I think building those relationships is the most important thing we can do at any level.
You know, when anybody starts with us on our staff and they're kind of just getting their feet wet, I just always tell them, keep it simple. Just do what you know for right now. You don't have to go and like light the world on fire in your first few weeks, but kind of do what you're comfortable with. And then from there, as you get more comfortable, then you can add in more of the curriculum and more of those things. But, you know, sometimes we overload ourselves and we try to do too much too fast, and then we're struggling, you know, so, you know, reach out, get help, attend conferences like this, and just, you know, like I said, just simple, like do what you're comfortable with. And then as you get more and more comfortable, add in and challenge yourself.
And like Kalie said, you know, that a bit, we want all of our students to be okay with making mistakes, with, you know, tripping up along the way, with that difficulty when you're learning something new. And you, as someone who transitioned, you kind of get to model that. Like Kalie said, you know, you can show them, hey, this is new for me. This is not, I don't know the answer. That's okay. Then you can go and find out. As soon as you're willing to, you're okay with knowing that you don't need to know everything and how to do everything, but you can seek help. Life is so much easier. Like, no one's expecting you to have, you know, high school at your 101 amazingly done on your first go round. It's, you know, I'm in year 24, 25, and I'm still learning, and that's never going to change. So.
All right, what are ways you engage families and or community with your program?
I can go ahead and answer this. It wasn't so much last year because we had so many restrictions, but now that I've been a year at the high school that I'm at, they're letting me do an adventure club. And excitingly to say, I just found out I won a grant today. So I wrote about inclusive backpacking and what I'm going to do with all the equipment that I purchased at the wonderful job, my second job. I got a second job just to buy equipment for this program. I'm going to have like a library of equipment, and everybody gets to check it out that wants to go, because sometimes with backpacking, it's the equipment that keeps you from participating, all that expensive stuff you have to have. And so families get to check it out, go on weekend adventures with each other. Each month, I'm taking a group of kids out into Kentucky to the state parks and national parks that we have to experience backpacking, kayaking, and stand-up paddleboarding. So I invite them into that, also sharing little videos with the parents, because kids go off talking how excited, and then they come back and tell me, hey, we did this with my family this weekend. So just having the equipment there, also bringing in people that are from diverse backgrounds and diverse identities has really helped, because sometimes kids have never been exposed to someone other than what their immediate family is. So I love living in downtown or teaching in downtown Louisville, where I have access and I have a diverse group of friends in the outdoor recreation community that come in and they speak to them, and everybody gets to process their feelings in that open sharing that many of you have already talked about. And it's really awesome to open up their eyes and to expose kids to their community and even their parents too. It helps. Sorry, long, but too quick.
Something that I plan to do at my new school, because it's only going to be my second year here in Mexico, Missouri. I started the National Archery in the Schools program. And so I'm hoping to get an actual team started up next year so we can go to competitions and things like that. And there's archery is really big in our community. So I think it'd be a great way to get those who do archery for hunting or for sport, whatever it might be, to come in and be like assistant coaches and just really support the kids that way.
All right, go ahead.
Another piece of it is the ability to, you know, make sure you're advocating within your students' families and your community as well, like letting them know what is going on in your program, because many of them, they've been to school, their physical education experiences may have been mixed, they may have enjoyed it, they may not have enjoyed it, and it has changed. So to show them what is going on and the purpose behind what the students are learning, I think is huge. So that's a really great way to, you know, just keep them informed. Is everybody going to read what you send out or watch what you send out? Not necessarily, but if a few do, and you keep putting those message forward, then they're going to place more value on the role of physical education and being active for themselves. And it might give them ideas of things they can do in their community as well.
I totally agree. So that's usually just communicating. Also, when students are just rock stars, making sure that we reach out and tell our families, like, your student was a rock star today, because sometimes they don't get that message, right? And it's just been super helpful. And then that student comes back and continues to be a rock star usually. But the other thing that I am planning to do, I'm also on a new site, and I'm in alt ed really. And so I'm on a middle school site, but I'm teaching high school. And many of my students have a split between independent study and credit recovery. And I'm hoping to tag team. We have a large special education population on the middle school side. And so having our students that are in credit recovery doing some leadership roles and really learning how to take on those jobs, if you will, and that responsibility of being the cool kid and the kid that can help, and making them feel needed and wanting to come to school and build that community across the middle school as well. I'm hoping it works out. We'll see.
All right. So what is one of your favorite beginning of the year activities to complete with your class?
I'll start this one if that's all right. I really like using the Project Adventure curriculum. It's a really great curriculum. But my favorite activity from there is, I'm trying to describe it. You have like an elastic band with several ropes attached to it. And you can do so many different types of activities with the students will hold on to like a 10-foot rope with the elastic band, and they can unstack cups and then restack them in a tower, or you can put like a marker in the middle of the elastic and have them try to draw letters or shapes on a whiteboard, or transporting objects from one place to another place. They always love those types of activities. So that's what I normally start out with.
Can you say the name? Sorry, can you say the name of that you first started with?
Yeah, it's called Project Adventure. It's they have middle school and high school curriculum books for those.
Fun. Yeah, I start off with a little thing called This or That, where they go to like one side, like, hey, do you like this or that? Just to show that they have a connection with someone else in the classroom. And then I give them a special topic to talk about. And I would break them off, like, even though you just split your class into two, then like get in a group of 3, get 4 random numbers. And that always helps them, like, hey, there's someone in this class that I have something in common with. And then some of those catch and toss nets, like it could have been like what you're describing. I just give them very brief descriptions and they got to figure it out, because in our class, communication is huge. And just learning how to talk, trial and error, learning that it's okay to like not be perfect the first time around. I feel like kids in this generation kind of feel that way. So it's kind of fun just to be like, okay, here's your error. I'm not putting restrictions on you. You come up with your creativity, just talk with each other. Here's the task and go. I love starting the year off that way.
One of my favorite ones is, the accordion mats that we often have. I lay them out and they're on one side of the gym and they have to move the mat to the other side of the gym, right, without touching the floor. And so watching them problem solve and discuss and all the interesting ways they try to move the mat is entertaining and just great for them to like get outside of their group, and themselves and communicate. And as you said, learn to communicate in a productive manner with their group.
I've used Ubuntu cards. I use them a lot with my Venture. They're like, if you ever played Spot It, there's cards, and on one side there's objects, and every single other card has a match. So everyone has a card, they meet with a person, and then they see what they have in common on the card. And then I ask them to come up with, speak to each other, and then come up with something in common that they can't see. So they can't, if they're both wearing blue t-shirts, it can't be that, because that's something that they can see. So you have to dig a little bit deeper. Now, some students they find out also. Some, you have to give them some nudges in terms of, okay, siblings, food, to help them along the way to figure it out. But some of the conversations when they realize, oh, we actually have something in common. Another one I do, I take it a bit further. I always ask them to fill out like a student information sheet, like, what have your experiences been like? What do you like? What's unique about you? Because you all have these awesome interests, and it helps me then connect with the student too. But I use those to make a people bingo, which is specific to them. So it's not just a generic one. And some of them are, and I always check with the students, I'm like, you need to let me know if you're okay with me sharing this. Then they need to go around, find out the person's name and figure out which one they actually match. And that's always interesting to see, again, the commonalities that people have with each other, the connections that they have, and just makes them start off like, okay, what do we, there's more to us than just what we see at face value.
What I would do, even with my elementary kids, is have different handshakes. And then you got some special handshake with somebody, and then you have another special handshake with somebody else, and then you have to change again with somebody else with a different handshake. So there's like 30 different handshakes that you can do. And then always say, well, you got to go find the original handshake buddy, and so just getting them to mix in that way too. Let's see, what current trends have you noticed over the last few years of teaching?
I think instant feedback, right, is huge. And now that we have technology to provide that sometimes has been super helpful. So with everything from, fitness testing, but also to using heart rate monitors where they can see on the board how they're doing and if they're reaching their goals, that sort of thing has been a shift that I have really noticed has improved motivation for students as they see like immediately how they're doing. That's been one of the shifts I've seen.
I think the one, it's been around for a while, but I think it's growing more, is just providing students with options. Like, hey, we don't all have to be the same, because guess what? We're not all the same. And so any activity I have, I provide 3 options. And if they need even more than that, I will give them individual options so they can participate at their level. I figure they're high school kids, as an adult, I get to choose at what intensity I work out and I do things. So just providing all those different options. Here's here's option 1, 2, and 3, not really telling them here, this is beginner, intermediate, and advanced. That's been really helpful. And I love hearing and seeing more people just providing kids with so many options instead of saying, hey, we all have to be the same.
So yeah, we lost my thought there for a minute, but I think I totally lost my thought. Sorry, I was running around with my little man. But yeah, so for students, the biggest thing is they want to know why they're doing something. They don't just, and I don't think that that's a new thing by any means. I do think they're just getting more vocal about it. Like they don't just want, like I said, I teach strength and conditioning mostly. They want to know what the purpose is behind things. And I love that. I think it's great. And so we really do try to give them the science or the why behind things and not just hand them stuff and say, go do it because I said so. And I find that typically if you give them the why, they do it better and harder and with more commitment.
I do think with, I think communication has become, and social interaction has become probably even more important for us to work on, because so many students are relying on their devices as almost like a safety shield in situations. So trying to, break that shield down and create opportunities to work on those social skills, particularly at, middle school, high school level, where it's not always the best environment for them. That's really important to give those opportunities.
Hey, I just want to say bye. I have to go to work now, so I can go earn some more equipment for PE. I just want to say thanks for letting me share and letting me listen to you all today.
Thank you,
for being
Kaylee.
here. Appreciate it. All right, we've got maybe 4 more questions there, and I'm looking ahead. They're all pretty good, and I would think we might be able to get to all of them. So, what are other districts doing about dressing out? What is the new normal?
I don't really, being obviously in the Midwest, I'm not sure how it kind of works out there, but even so pre-pandemic, we don't really have a dress code other than their shoes. We really need them to have a shoe on that's going to stay on the foot. But we really don't care what they wear. We've got quite a socioeconomic spread in our building. And so as long as they're participating and doing the movements and the equipment isn't, distracting from that. So, I mean, if you would walk in even to my weight room, you would see quite an array of what they're wearing. Obviously things have to be covered just to be appropriate for the environment. That's about the only guideline that we really give. Last year in our locker rooms were closed. So we really just were like, come in what you're wearing. Many kids would go into the bathroom and change, but most would just work out in what they wore to school. And I think especially with the attire right now, I don't, obviously the Midwest, I don't know if it's different out West, but most of them are wearing yoga pants or shorts and t-shirts anyway to school. So, we didn't really care what color it is and all that stuff. So we just want them to exercise.
Yeah, we were the same. Locker rooms were closed. Our previous expectation is that you change for PE. Again, we don't, as long as it's school appropriate and appropriate for the activity that you're doing, then that's fine. So this year they weren't changing, but we obviously were encouraging them to be in school with something they were comfortable moving in. Like I said, that may have, often said, look, well, if you throw a spare t-shirt in your bag, is if you do get hot and you want to switch out later on, then you can do that. Or if you've worn something that you really like, but it isn't going to be the most conducive to movement, then yes, bring something extra. Vast majority of students, no problems. And whether it was this year or last year, we always try and help students if they don't have something, so they don't have a new pair, they haven't got a pair of shoes that is appropriate. But we try to make it not a barrier and try to work with them in terms of like, what can we do to help you be successful in this environment?
We're pretty much the same way as you all have mentioned. The only time I kind of require a certain type of clothing is during tumbling, because I'll have students who will wear skirts to class, and it's probably not super appropriate to wear skirts while we're tumbling. So other than that, they can pretty much wear whatever they want as long as they're active.
Our district, for the most part, everybody does require students to change out into their school-specific PE uniform. At my site, we don't change, actually. We don't have locker rooms because, as I said, it's alt ed. They don't give us a lot of resources. So, and I'm fine with that. I totally agree. I think the most important thing is that our students are moving. And I'm hoping there's a shift in our district, especially, post-pandemic. As I said, we weren't really open at all. So I haven't seen any adjustments, but I think really taking the focus on the dressing out off and the focus shifting to activity and movement and engagement, that's, well, I think that's the most important part, right? So as long as they're in something where, as you said, Erika, where shoes, that's important. We also, we've had loaner programs and things to help students out. But I think as long as they can feel comfortable moving in it, might not be what I would want to work out in, but it's not me, so.
All right, what are your favorite ways to see or show student growth and skill and mastery?
I'm going to jump back on real quick with Padlet. Pretty amazing platform that allows students so many options and choices of how they demonstrate their mastery in terms of like videos or links or pictures, documents, all of that. They have all the options and it stays in one place. And so that has been my new thing that I've learned during the pandemic, and I'm super excited about it.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Joe. I said I spend most of my time, outside of a pandemic in a weight room. So of course, like our fun is at the end of the trimester, you've worked really hard. We usually do some max out testing. And, we always have like a record board, but instead of it just being about, those top kids that make our board, I usually have a whiteboard designed just for kids who reach a new PR. And it can be any of our testings that we do, from running to sit-ups to anything like that. They can put whatever they improved on. They get to sign this improvement board, and then we kind of take a picture of it. And, and I try to walk by it usually at least a few times during the class period, and we clap and celebrate, even if it's a 5-pound increase. And so, that's usually our big celebration at the end, is just sort of, they worked hard, they set a goal, and they reached it.
One of the first things I usually teach is about the stages of learning, and how, again, when you're learning something new, beginning, it's messy, it's clunky, you make mistakes, and then you advance through. And I kind of cycle that through most things and have them have, quick self-assessment. Where are you at in this particular skill area? And then where do you want to go? What do you want to work on? Are you more concerned with, let's say, badminton? Are you more concerned with serving, or do you want to master the drop shot? Or you're like, no, I want to improve my gameplay. So having them have that autonomy to kind of choose as well. And obviously, like I said, video is such a great way, because we don't see those small increments on a daily basis. But you as a teacher, and even I've been blown away, particularly with swimming, seeing here's where you were at and look at you now. And they're like, whoa, I'm like, you did that. I didn't do that. You did that. So anything where you can visually show them how far they've come and, give them that opportunity to celebrate for themselves, I think is huge.
I'd have to agree with that, Joe. That's exactly what I was going to talk about, because I remember the first time I got my first smartphone and I had it in my pocket, and I was like, I talked to a kid and I was like, you're throwing like this, you really should throw like that. He's like, I'm not doing that. And so I was like, I didn't want to argue with him. So I just backed away, pulled out my camera or my phone and turned on the video camera and recorded him without him knowing, so he wouldn't try to adjust anything. And I went and showed it to him. And his eyes were totally wide open. He was like, wow, I didn't realize that's what I was doing. And then it was really great to see him throughout the semester improve that throwing skill. But just him being able to see himself was amazing to him.
If you haven't used Flipgrid for videos, you really should look into it. It's an awesome tool.
Okay, next question. What would the general phys ed teacher like the adapted phys ed teachers to know to help the students? What would the general phys ed teachers like the adapted phys ed teachers to know to help the students?
Say, what are you looking for here? I don't really know that I understand the question. I'm kind of both in our building, so.
That's a great point, since I didn't write the questions. I'm guessing it's something to the effect that, what do we as the, maybe not the adapted PE teachers, maybe you are both, but maybe what do we want the adapted PE teacher to know in order to help the student they're working with?
It's kind of a strange question for me. The school I'm at now, there are no adapted PE teachers, but in schools I've worked at in the past, we've had adapted PE teachers where we'd use a co-teach model, and I would be leading the lesson, and then as soon as we would break out to the activity, the adapted PE teacher would make all the modifications they needed to, whether it's pulling certain students aside and making a different game, or telling me, hey, look out for this student, they're going to play with your kids, but they might need this little adjustment. So it's more, I think the question should be the opposite way around for me anyways. What can the adapted PE teachers let us know as the general ed, so we can make sure all the kids' needs are getting met?
The only thing I can think to answer this question is teaching your students how to talk to the adapted PE students. Sometimes that's a really awkward thing for our gen ed students, is that they don't realize they could just talk to our adapted PE students just like they would talk to any person, no matter their cognitive or physical levels. Just talking to them and treating them and saying hi to them and welcoming them into a space, or we've created kind of a unified PE class, and for a long time we were bringing in just like we called it pals. I don't know if you've ever heard of pals. We would bring them in and they would work with our adapted PE students, and it really changed like the whole face of our school, because now when those kids would come into the lunchroom, there was friendly faces, and some of our popular kids were coming out of their space because they were learning how to interact with that group of students. And so it really showed the whole school like, hey, they're people, and even if they can't communicate back with words, they can still appreciate the communication with them. So I don't know how else to answer that question, but that's.
Do you have any adapted students that are mainstreamed into your classes?
Oh yeah, we have, so especially in the weight room, that's probably been when I get a question from teachers, especially about autistic students, about what class would be the greatest to integrate them into a gen ed class. I always say the weight room, because our weight room is something that's predictable. And once we create our routine, it's the same. We may change up our movements, but it'll be the same every day. So for a student who has especially autism, it's something they know what they're going to get every single day they walk in. Where sometimes the gym space can be a little more unpredictable, and you don't always know how the interactions are going to go and what game they're going to do well in. But yeah, so we have all kinds of different levels because we only have one section of our adapted PE through the day. So not all of them can fit with their schedule, but that's, again, just teaching them how to talk to each other.
I think more than anything, just keep the lines of communication open, find out what's on the IEP, what are they working on, what are their interests, what are their strengths, make sure you are in touch with their case manager on a regular basis so that you're aware of anything that's occurring. On any given day, any student may come in and not have had the best day. And if you know that ahead of time, your approach can be completely different. So yeah, I always, if I have students with adapted needs, it's always like, right, what I want to find out as much information as I possibly can to help them be as successful as possible in that environment. So just ongoing communication.
I would second that. I would just, if what I would want my adapted PE teacher to know is that I'm super excited that they're there. And I really want them to join in, communicate, co-teach, as Eric was saying, and know what goals they're working on, but also know sometimes there's other background that they might not share with PE. That's not a goal that's specific to PE, but it does impact their social interactions, right? So communicating all of those needs and including me in every IEP, I want to be there. And so that would be, just thankful that they're there and want to communicate.
We've come down to the final question. So what are ways that you model mindfulness to be a better teacher?
I started writing on my colleagues started doing this. She was each day was writing something that she was grateful for. So she would have it, and if students she missed a day, the students like, hang on a second, where is this? And what I started doing instead was, today I'm looking forward to. So on the board each day, I'm like, I have 2 or 3 things I'm looking forward to each day. And again, sometimes it can be as simple as I'm actually looking forward to going to sleep because I'm really tired. And I'm like, that's okay. That's okay. It doesn't always have to be something huge and big and amazing, but having them get in that mindset of, okay, you wake up on a day and can you at least pick 1 or 2 things that you are looking forward to? And it, getting into that positive mindset. And even if things haven't gone your way, you can still, try and flip the switch a little bit to make it more positive. And if the end of that is that gratitude at the end of the day, what are you pleased about, and giving them opportunities to share that with students as well. What are you looking forward to this weekend? What did you do this last weekend that you enjoyed? Just having them think about those things, I think is really important.
I am closing classes with just let's just sit and breathe, and it's like 2 minutes, and basically they at the end are rating how, on a scale of 1 to 5, how they are feeling after class, right? And that gives me that quick check-in as they are heading out of like, okay, well, Joni just held up a 2, and when she first came in, she was at a 5. So something went awry during class. I need to go check in with her. And so it's just a transition time from being active to going back to their class, and gives all of us that like, okay, let's relax. And I've found that to be super helpful.
Over the past really 4 or 5 years, like I said, we're strength and conditioning, but we do a lot of sports psychology stuff, which, I explain to them really carries over to life. So we practice meditation, we practice visualization, and really, and then we talk about, controlling the thoughts in your mind and how you could do that. And a lot of our conversation obviously is about like trying to be successful as an athlete, but at the same time, we talk about how that's really a life skill, like a testing life, you're going to take tests, and how do you control that? And then I'm very honest, that's kind of how we do it with the classes, but I'm very honest about how I practice mindfulness. I have hours set, and really, I'll be honest with kids, like there's times where you can email me, but I'm probably not going to respond after a certain point, because that's my time away from what I'm doing, my job, and it's what helps me reset myself for the next day. I talk about the types of workouts that I do that really are stress release for me. I did a kickboxing lesson today, actually in my session, and that's probably my biggest stress release. I just tell them, like, for me, punching things feels good. And so I got a bag, and I can be, positive in it. And it's what helps me kind of control my thoughts and my emotions. But yeah, so it's kind of the big ones for us.
I think when in my classes, I talk a lot about how I'm physically active, and I have a super easy way I start the conversation, because I usually wear shorts to school every day, and I have 2 tattoos on my calves, one on each calf, and one's about rappelling and climbing, and the other one is the Iron Man logo. And so I always get questions, what is that all about? So I get to talk to them about how I use exercise, not only for competition, but I also use it for fun and for relaxation as well. If I'm having a bad day, I just go out on a run or a ride or a row, and I felt better.
Well,
All right. I thank you guys tremendously for hanging in there and putting up with us. And thank you for being able to join us. And you guys are, I think, the first ever high school session that EPEW has put on. So thank you very much.
that's amazing. Thank you for sharing your knowledge.
Thank you.
We have our bingo social at 3:00 Pacific time. So I'm not sure exactly which time zone everybody's in, but we'd love to have you join us for our final social for this year. And again, thank you again for being part of our family. You guys are awesome.
Thank you for hosting.
Thank you.
See you later.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you for attending the 48th Annual Elementary Physical Education Workshop. We're glad you were here.
Please follow us on our social media platforms. EPEW can be found on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.
Please check out our website for links to more great sessions. Just go to epew-cp.weebly.com and click on the virtual EPEW 2021 tab at the top and scroll down.
EPEW 2021 Educators Assemble would not be possible without the support and dedication from the amazing EPEW committee. The committee has been hard at work for months preparing for this workshop. Thank you to Linda McGee, Barbara Grattan, Scott Wilson, Stephanie Sandino, Julie Miller, Jessica Monlux, Kayla Ailman, Shelby Lozano, Andrea Chavez, Scott Townsend, and Cindy Chase.
Thank you for attending EPEW, where our motto is, come to learn, leave as family.